U.S. President Donald Trump says the United States could respond militarily to the attacks on Saudi-Arabian oil facilities. 2 drone attacks hitting the Abqaiq facility, the largest of its kind, and the Khurais oil field. That's the country's second biggest. Now, Washington has blamed Iran. President Trump tweeting, "There's reason to believe that we know the culprit. We are locked and loaded, depending on verification, but are waiting to hear from the kingdom," referring to Saudi Arabia. Iranian-backed Houthi rebels based in Yemen have claimed responsibility, but the U.S. says there is no evidence the attacks were launched from there. For his part, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani had this to say.
Americans, instead of confessing that their presence in the region, in Syria, in Yemen, and other areas has been problematic, they accuse the countries of the region.
Now, DW's Oliver Salat has this from Washington about the discussion in the U.S. Capitol about how to respond to the attacks.
President Trump's Twitter thread is causing confusion. The Pentagon reportedly urging restraint, and observers actually believed the firing of hawkish security advisor John Bolton would pave the way for a more conciliatory tone. Now, President Trump's tweet ratcheting up tensions with Iran once again. His plans of negotiating with Iran's President Rouhani are becoming more unrealistic. While a new war is clearly not in the president's interest, it also becomes obvious that the U.S. is lacking a strategy on the Middle East, and that puts both countries in a dangerous position.
So how are the markets responding to the loss of 5% of global daily oil production? Monica Jones from DW Business is here for more on that. Good morning, Monica.
Good morning,
oil prices spiking right away on the news. Yeah. What's it looking like right now?
They've eased somewhat. I think you mentioned it also. I've just checked just before I came to the studio. Currently, Brent crude stands at $67 a barrel. It is still 10% higher than it was before the attack, but it's somewhat eased. And I mean, we're not surprised, of course, that oil prices spiked. Those attacks were hitting the world's biggest petroleum processing facility, and Saudi Arabia, of course, being the biggest oil exporter, shipping more than 7 million barrels a day. A knockout of 5% of global oil supply, crude supply, is dramatic, at least at first, especially when you consider that the facility will not be operational for weeks to come, according to experts.
And this represents 50% of overall Saudi oil production. So it is quite a blow, and it shows, you know, just how vulnerable our global oil
it's all connected,
isn't it?
It's all connected. It's not just vulnerable. I think it's very important to say that it's very volatile. Let me just remind you that we've been talking for weeks and months about falling oil prices. In fact, they were falling below $60 a barrel in recent weeks, to the point that only last week on Thursday, OPEC members came together, and Saudi Arabia in particular demanded that everybody sticks to cutting output in order to keep prices somewhat okay, especially after it seemed on Wednesday last week when US President Donald Trump sort of implied that he might ease sanctions on Iran, which would have boosted output and obviously weigh on prices. So we're talking about a very volatile situation, but not that dramatic yet. The situation in Saudi Arabia, what happened is dramatic, but when it comes to oil prices, the peaks this year we've seen were $75 a barrel. We're not there yet. We're much, much lower right now.
Okay, where are we? Are we right at the 60 mark?
$67 a barrel. This is what we're having right now.
Right now. Okay, but what about consumers? I mean, when I drive up to the pump, you know, later today, am I going to feel this immediately?
I don't know if you can feel it immediately here in Germany just yet. Of course, whenever something happens with the oil price, eventually it'll hit the consumer. But it's quite interesting that I found out, of all, it'll be the motorists on the US West Coast who are most likely to feel it. Why? Because oil facilities, those that were attacked, account for nearly half of all US crude imports from Saudi Arabia. And California, in particular, relies very heavily on those imports due to lack of pipelines to connect them with oil-rich Texas. So there's a problem for you.
So the sun doesn't always shine in California, does it, when it comes to problems like this? Monica, thanks very much.
Okay.